Now zoom into the performance of the 5 African teams at the competition. Let's start with the team that is serious, the team that is in the quarterfinal of the competition, Morocco. Let's look at their record throughout the competition. Susu, just take us through this.
Well, they've not lost a game, which is very impressive. And you're not going to lose games if you concede 1 goal the whole tournament. So their team style was, we used our Opta kind of graph. That's the word to say, graph to describe. So they were classed as slow and direct. So they move the ball pretty slowly, but they try and move it upfield as fast as possible. Their XG is 3.0, but their XG against is 3.8, which is pretty high. And it's interesting because
they are supposed to have conceded four goals.
About close to 4. So let's just round it up to 4. But what I like is that the only goal they conceded is a own goal. And I would say part of it is the chances that they are letting the other teams have. They are not very good chances. It's more so the teams are creating a lot of chances, so they are shooting a lot, but low quality shots. So like we saw against the Spain game, Spain got about what? I can't remember the number, but they got
0.9, I think.
Yeah, 0.9 XG, but the number was, they took like 12 shots, 10 shots. So, and if you looked at the circles when we showed them, they're very small circles. So they are letting the shots come, but the shots are, because there's a lot of bodies, they are either far out. It becomes difficult, and then you add Bono in the pool. It makes it a whole other option, because now even if it gets past the defenders, you have a world-class keeper behind them. So you can play like this for a while, but the best thing is to keep the XG down. Luckily, they've not conceded yet. And the thing about the whole XG thing is it's from game to game. So this 3.8 they've managed to escape is not going to come back to bite them. Because in the next game, if they keep it 0.3, 0.4, they've limited them in that game. So usually, it's something you see correcting itself over the course of a league season. So if a team has like this after 4 games in the league, it means that their defense is giving up chances. And you will see it show itself down the path where they concede games. But in a tournament setting like this, you can get away with it. But I like that they're also finishing better, because an XG of 3.0, you scored 4. There's quality finishing there. So it's a good balance. But the XG against is a bit of a worry. But it won't matter as much, because if you limit the people in the next game and the game after that, you will get away with it.
Yeah, they were in a very difficult group, because on paper, Belgium and Croatia were expected to qualify from this group. Morocco were clearly in that group, and then Canada. How did they end up top in the group?
I think they managed their campaign well. They knew that against Canada, they had to win. And they knew that they had a better team going into that matchup. And so they were a little bit more open in that game. And I'm pretty sure that contributed to the number of chances that they gave out to the opposing team. So they were a little bit more open. They got the necessary goals. They got a little bit lucky, because Canada could have easily drawn that game, or even gone ahead to win that game. So they managed that game out very well. Then against Croatia, then against Belgium, then they brought the typical Regragui style, where they were very defensive, very solid at the back, and frustrated the opposing team as long as they could. Then they took advantage of set pieces to get past the Belgians. And it was just an efficient, productive kind of outing that they used in their campaign. And for me, that's how I would rate their campaign. Knowing very well when to open up, and knowing very well when to be very cautious, very defensive, and focus on being efficient going forward.
Susu?
Well, yeah, as really said it, that they play to their strengths. So a good example is the Belgian game. That in-swinging free kick they tried twice. The first one was disallowed because of size interfering replay. The second one, no such love for Courtois. Then a great skill by Ziyech to give it to, I can't remember who scored the goal, but he kind of, a great skill by Ziyech. And what I like, and to go back to the thing about their XG, if you look at their XG in their games, I believe there's only maybe, they've not managed to get a game where they've had an XG over 1. It's 0.7, 0.8, 0.6. So they are focusing more on the defensive solidity part. And if the gap between their XG and their XG against was very high, it would be like, I would be like, this team has been lucky. But when it's close like this, and you can also see that the chances they are letting their opponents having a lot of shots, but a lot of bad shots. So that's a legitimate way to defend, letting your opponents have a lot of bad shots. So if you want to really get into the minutiae, you can go and start looking at XG per shot to see how good the chances are. So even though there are a lot of shots, they are defending them well and they are conceding the shots in places where it's not scary for them. It's not anything to be worried about. And they are playing to their strengths. They're slow and direct styles because they know that, look, these teams will come at us. Let's give our wingers space. Let's give Ziyech, Buffal, that space in the final third, El Nesiri. These are guys who can pick up the ball and run and make things happen in the opposition box. But it's easier when there's space. If you remember, was it against us in the AFCON? Buffal scored. Was it Buffal who scored?
Buffal scored.
Buffal scored against us. Yeah, and that because we gave him a bit of space and he made something happen. So if you know you have players who can do that, they can drive the ball forward. Because I'm sure you've seen Buffal's dribble on Marcos Llorente, and he completed five dribbles in the first half. That's what you want to do, play to your player's strength. So I like that they are doing that. And in terms of set pieces, you have Hakim Ziyech. He has a wicked left foot. He can make the deliveries happen. So sometimes it's not all about passing and keeping the ball. Because when we're talking about Spain, I like teams that do that. But you also need to create chances. And for me, that's where Spain were lacking. You are keeping the ball all right. And once you're keeping the ball, you're making it difficult for your opponent. But what are you doing with the ball? Absolutely nothing. So it's cause 90 in that situation. So they don't mind not having the ball. But when they get the ball, they are making something out of it. They are trying to create something. And if you look at it, they are doing a 1 goal a game kind of thing. Yeah. But if you are not conceding, 1 goal a game is enough. So it's about game management.
That defensive solidity, you need your players to buy into that philosophy. And you need players to be tactically disciplined and be committed. If your players aren't into that, you have issues being able to map out such a strategy. You look at Hakim Ziyech, you don't see him club side being having a workaholic kind of style. But when it comes to Morocco, knowing very well that the Halilhodzic that he didn't get on with, he didn't like, is out of the window. Regragui is clear. It's clear that he's a little bit on good terms with the manager, and he's bought into the manager's philosophy. So we have Hakim Ziyech tracking back, working hard a lot. You have Sofiane Buffal. Buffal is kind of a flair kind of player. If you watch him in his time in France, he moved over to, I think, Southampton. Mm-hmm. He played for Southampton for a while. He's that flair kind of player, and he's not the type that you would on a normal day demand a lot of defensive work from him. But because the Regragui has been able to coax that out of him and get him to be a bit more committed to the defensive side. That's how come this style has been sustainable. So your philosophy can be as good as it gets, but once you don't have players who get to buy into that philosophy, it will be flawed at the end of it all. And for Morocco, they have the perfect match where the philosophy meets the players that are willing and committed to play very defensive and be efficient when they attack.
Let's look at Tunisia now. Morocco's North African brothers. They are a story of the competition. They were in the same group with defending champions France, Australia, and Denmark. They got 4 points, but unfortunately for them, they ended up dropping out of the group stages. It was a pretty impressive performance on the whole at the World Cup, just that the 4 points wasn't enough.
Yeah, and for me, what I found interesting is how these teams they limit their opponent's chances. Even though that there's all that, the shots, they are letting the teams take bad shots. But what hurts Tunisia, you can see it here, they underperformed their XG. Mm-hmm. And if they had even got 2, and maybe got a goal in the Australia game or the Denmark game, their story is different. Mm-hmm. You know, so that's what really hurt them.
Considered 1 goal, and it's the 1 goal that kicked them out.
Yeah, exactly. It really hurt them.
And that's why I say Morocco managed their campaign well. It was clear that they had a roadmap. We'll try to get this result against this opposing team. We'll try to get this result against this opposing team. And that's how we are likely to qualify. Again, for Tunisia, you play a goalless draw against Denmark, fine. You get to meet a weakened French side, you beat them, wonderful. But that game in between those 2 games, that's where for me they lost it. You simply cannot lose to Australia in that situation, knowing very well that you are likely going to play against a weaker French team, knowing very well that pretty much they had already booked their place in the quarterfinal. That was there for the taking. Morocco playing against Canada needed a win, and they knew that the Canadians were no match for them in terms of technical quality, one-on-one ability with their players, and so they opened up a little bit. But Tunisia even with all their quality against this Australian team, they still sat back and they weren't attacking enough. They didn't have too much attacking verve for me, and that's where their campaign was lost.
Yeah, I'll disagree with you on that, because from a data standpoint, Australia were lucky to win the game. The goal they scored was not a kind of... It was, if you look at it from a data standpoint, it was a free goal. Because you don't score headers from that far out. And the way it kind of just looped, it was kind of... It happens, don't get me wrong. It was great technique from the goal scorer. But I'm talking from... We're looking at it from a kind of... I want to look at it from a kind of, what did they do? Where did they go wrong for them? And if that's where you're saying it went wrong for them, then that means nothing went wrong. What you're telling me is that they were unlucky. Because if you look at that game on balance, that was a game Tunisia should have won. And that's why I went back to say they didn't take their chances. But to say that they kind of let... I think you have been a bit unfair to their defensive efforts in the sense that they limited the Australians. It's not like the Australians played them off their park or out-created them. The Australians were lucky. Yeah. So I don't want to say that Tunisia kind of... They were poor in front of goal, but that's where it was. I don't think talking about their defensive efforts and their game management is it, because they managed that game fine in terms of limiting
in 3 games
and limiting Australia in creating chances. It's not like Australia were the worst. If you look at the teams they played, Australia created the least chances of all the teams they played. Yet Australia were the one who got the goal. So I don't subscribe to that they didn't manage the game more. I think what hurt them more was they are going for the chances they didn't take, rather than their management of games, which I think was pretty fine.
Yeah, efficiency also counts. So they weren't efficient in that crucial game, that pivotal game against Australia, and that cost them.
Let's look at Cameroon now. Cameroon, West African or Central African team. They were in the same group with Brazil, Serbia, and Switzerland. The Switzerland got thumped 6-1 against Portugal. Let's see how well they did. They ended up beating Brazil, finished with 4 points, scored 4, conceded 4, an XG of 3.4. So it means they outperformed their XG. Goals against, I'm sure it's that goalkeeper's fault. 5.8 they were expected to concede. They conceded just 4. So, no, he actually did well. So the goalkeeping was good, the defense was good.
And the Brazil game, that keeper we all thought... he let himself down a bit in the Serbia game. But he made up for it in the Brazil.
I think he was the man of the match.
Yeah, he was man of the match. He made up for it in the Brazil game.
So 4 points
I believe Brazil got an XG of about 2.4 or 2.5 in that game. And if you look at that, that's close to half the XG they considered in the tournament. And they kept a clean sheet. So it just shows this tournament has not respected XG. Yeah. It really hasn't.
It hasn't. Again, another African team with 4 points, which was not enough.
They weren't efficient enough. They didn't take advantage of their chances they got, especially in that game against Serbia and even against Switzerland. They created some decent opportunities and they didn't take advantage of those opportunities. Switzerland had one big chance, they took it, and that was the end of it. And so for me, I wouldn't say it's because they didn't manage their style, their campaign well. I wouldn't say it was down to being unlucky. I would say it's because they didn't deliver on the efficient side of the pitch. They weren't efficient enough, especially when they created so many chances, using their team style, being fast and direct with their pacey forwards up top. And for me, that's how come they lost out on progressing to the round of 16.
So Cameroon on paper have a quality team. The spine of the team looks pretty solid. A new goalkeeper has come in, but before the competition, heading to the competition, you have Onana, you have Zambo Anguissa in midfield, you have Abubakar up top. In fact, the forward line looks really strong in Abubakar, Choupo-Moting. These are top quality players. Toko Ekambi. These are top quality players. And for me, this was one of the more impressive performances for Cameroon at the World Cup. I think it was just unfortunate that they couldn't make it. To be in a group against Brazil, Switzerland, I didn't expect them to get 4 points at the end of the competition. But to get 4 points and miss out, was it? Yeah, Switzerland got 5 points in.
No, Switzerland got 6.
Switzerland got 6.
Because they lost to Brazil, but they beat
Cameroon and beat Serbia. Exactly. So, fine margins.
Yes, and it comes back to that Serbia game. That was the game they should have won rather than the Brazil game when I look at what they did. And what hurt them is they should have never gone 3-1 down. When I believe, did they score first? And then
Castelletto got the opening.
And then when the Serbians equalized, that one, okay, Serbia has equalized. But those 2 quick goals they conceded, before, I think it was just before the
halftime.
That's what let them down. So it was very disappointing. And if they had been a bit more intelligent in that game, I believe they would have gotten a result because they created chances. And Serbia were not a very smart team for me because if you notice, Serbia threw away 2 leads in this tournament because they were leading 2-1 against Switzerland and lost. They were leading 3-1 against Cameroon and lost. So for me, that game they should have won. The other game they kind of, where that one chance they gave against the Swiss was too much. That was another poor one because they had chances themselves. So that, again, those 2 games were more winnable than
the Brazil game.
Yet that's how somehow the game they won. And for me, the Swiss game, if they had gotten a draw and beat Serbia and even lost against Brazil, they probably would have been a better place because there's none of the other teams was beating Brazil. You see,
guys, let's be fair. Hindsight is 2020.
Of course.
And this is what I think. If Cameroon had beaten Serbia in the game after Switzerland, I don't think Brazil wouldn't have fielded a weakened team, knowing that if Cameroon had beat them, it could have cost Brazil a place. If you look at the numbers, because going into that game, Cameroon just had 1 point. If Cameroon had 3 points heading into the Brazil game, Brazil would have known that if they field a weakened team and Cameroon beats them, and Switzerland also beat Serbia in the aggregate, Brazil could have gone out. Same as France. I think the last 2 games, or the wins against the big teams, Tunisia also, beating France in the last game. Had Tunisia beaten, who was it? France. Australia. Would have, Tunisia would have had 4 points in that, going into the last game. And I don't think France would have fielded a weakened team because that could have affected their own chances.
You're right. But the reason I'm saying that is that having those points earlier and giving up those points to teams that were closer to them or inferior. In Tunisia's case, if Australia don't win that game, that means Australia are on 0 points going into the final day. And if Tunisia on 4, Australia know they're out. Australia are not going to play for the win against Denmark in that same way. They are probably, and that might even work in Denmark's favor because Denmark beat them heavily, right?
And France feels a strong team and beats Tunisia.
Yeah, so it could have worked, but from what we saw from the Danes were very flat. So even needing to win and knowing that all they had to do was win to go to, they might not have been able to do it. And in Cameroon's case, let's say they get 1 point against the Swiss and then 3 points against Serbia and they're on 4. Remember, Switzerland would have had 1 point going into that Serbia game.
Yeah. No, 3 points because they beat Cameroon.
No, I'm saying that let's say they are drawn.
Okay.
Their 4 points had been reversed and they were going into on 4-6. So it was like top of the table. Yeah. So that means the Swiss would have had 1 point. Doing that they need a big win to kind of overtake them. And the Serbs are They're on 0. They're also playing for their pride. But remember, they have this whole, a few Albanian guys there. The Serbians might still take the game seriously. And if the Serbians are a bit more smart and get that, because they might think to themselves, look, we haven't won a game this tournament. Let's make our nation proud.
But I think that was a similar situation. Switzerland knew they had to win because Cameroon also had a chance of beating Brazil.
Yeah.
So it's still.
But Serbia were playing for qualification and they messed up. I'm just saying that different permutation and putting the group in different. The teams you face and how you face them matters. And sometimes it just doesn't go your way. It's not like anyone is a conspiracy or anything like that. It just doesn't go your way because of whatever. And for me, I still believe Brazil might have rested some players. Not all. They wouldn't have done maybe the basically 10 changes they did. They might have rested like 3 or 4. And maybe if Cameroon hold on, because Brazil were not efficient in that game, Brazil don't take their chances. So Brazil still win that game and get 7 points. And Cameroon get 5. They still qualify. So there's still, I don't want to say that it's because, but they just drop points that I feel they should not have dropped.
Let's look at Senegal now. Let's look at Senegal's record. They made it out of the group stages. They were in the same group with the Netherlands, Qatar, and Ecuador. And they finished second in that group, went on to the round of 16. And over the weekend, they were beaten by England by 3-0. Let's look at Senegal's record in the competition. This was the first time they had made it out of the group since 2002, where their current head coach was the captain of that 2002 squad. 5 goals they scored throughout the competition. If you're talking about the group stages, they scored 5 goals, conceded 4. The rest of the 3 goals came against England. An XG of 4.6, pretty impressive outdoing their XG. XG against of 3.5, but they ended up conceding 7 goals. So to explain that.
So if you look at the Netherlands match, for example, the Netherlands didn't create quite as much as them. They created a similar amount, I think it was maybe just above 1 or just below 1. It was in that range. It didn't reach 2, but they conceded 2 goals. Then you go to the Ecuador game. Again, similar. Ecuador didn't create much. They conceded 1. Same thing in the Qatar game. Qatar didn't create much. They conceded 1. So they kept conceding goals that didn't need to be conceded. And even if you look at the England game, England's XG was about 1.2 or 1.5 or something. England scored 3. So they were not as compact.
Yeah. For me, it's 9 defending.
Exactly.
Because you look at the goals they conceded.
I want to pin you down on something. If you look at your record in the group stages, where you are facing teams, one team that is better than you on paper, you conceded twice. A team that you consider yourself around the same, you concede. A team that you consider yourself better than you concede. Why do you go into the England game that open?
That for me, you highlighted it in your analysis. Naive defending, and no matter how much coaching you give to your players, if they are not able to apply those basic defensive principles, there's nothing you can do. And for me, that's the disappointing bit, because you have accomplished players playing so naively at the back. Look at the goals they conceded against England. 3 players going in for the guy who has the ball, forgetting or neglecting or ignoring the runner who's coming from deep. That's naive defending. You look at the goals they conceded against Netherlands. That's on Edouard Mendy. Naive goalkeeping. Look at the second goal. Parry the ball out of the area. You parry it back into the danger zone. Then you have David Klaassen come in and finish it off. There's no reason for you to leave your line and come to attempt to punch that ball. He fails to get there on time. Cody Gakpo gets his head to the ball. He gets the goal. Minus those chances, I didn't see the Netherlands beating Senegal. I saw that game as a draw, and they let it slip, and they repeated those naive defensive traits against England. And so for me, it all boils down to the fact that they were naive in defending at the back, and that cost them. Yes, they were a little bit inefficient going forward. They missed a couple of big chances in their games they played, but at the end of the day, the main issue why they didn't progress beyond the round of 16 was down to the fact that they were naive defending in those games.
Before we take the break, let's look at the 4 teams that we've profiled and ask ourselves if they'll be happy. So Morocco, clearly, per the celebrations, you can clearly see they've made history. They are happy, so we'll not talk about them. For Cameroon, if you look at the expectations before the competition and after the competition, do you think they should be satisfied with what they did?
I think the win over Brazil in the last game will make it sweet. It will be a bittersweet ending. They'll go home happy. They'll think to themselves, we could have probably done a bit more against Switzerland and Serbia. But once you beat Brazil, you're probably thinking to yourself, you know what? This World Cup, it didn't go well, but we can live okay.
Points.
Yeah, we can live okay. It's not like we came to disgrace us. It was close enough. You know, if things had gone a bit differently, if Serbia and Switzerland draw, maybe, so they'll probably feel to themselves, we could have got this. So they were a bit disappointed.
I think they'll be okay with it, looking at the circumstances, because we saw this happen in 2014, where camp issues or a camp row led to an implosion in their campaign. This World Cup, they had a similar issue with Andre Onana, and it didn't really derail their campaign. They
handled it better.
They handled it a bit better. So it didn't really derail their campaign. And yes, it cost them a couple of goals in that game against Serbia, but it didn't really derail their campaign.
So for me, he showed up against Brazil.
Yes. So for me, I think they will be happy, knowing very well that it shows that they learned their lesson from the 2014 campaign when they were in the same situation. They had a camp row. They imploded in 2014. This time around, they had a camp row. They handled it a little bit better. So I think they will be.
Let's talk about Denmark, Australia. At the end of the competition, and you looked at the performance.
I'll be frustrated.
I think they'll be disappointed.
I'll be very frustrated. Knowing that it was there for the taking. And your overly conservative style, I think they mentally, they were too conservative for my liking. Tactically, they were conservative. Mentality-wise, too, they were
that's
overly
why I want to
conservative.
pin you down, Yao. On one hand, you are crediting Morocco for the same approach, but on the other hand, you are saying Tunisia.
Like I said, Morocco handled their campaign better. Tunisia,
because it's basically this. If you look at the numbers, Morocco had what 3.4 XG expected.
No, 3.0.
3.0 and then 3.8 goals expected. This is 2.3. So the difference is almost the same.
But
the
that
styles
game
are
against
similar.
Australia, you had to win that game against Australia. By hook or by crook, you had to win that game against Australia. I remember this Jose Mourinho saying in preparation for a league game that, oh yes, football, a lot of things can happen. You can lose, you can win, you can draw. There are some crazy situations that can happen. Someone can play a very long range shot and you might catch your goalkeeper unawares and end up in the back of the net. You lose that game. But there are some games that you simply cannot lose. Knowing very well that you were going up against France, and if you had won that game against Australia, you would have given yourself 4 points in the lead up to the game against France, and you would have given yourself a good shot at even drawing that game and getting enough points to progress to the round of 16. So for that game, for them to lose that game, that for me is the frustrating bit. They had to win that game. Whether they got unlucky with the Australia goal or not, they had to win that game, and they had to do everything in their power to win that game. They failed to do so, and that's the frustrating bit.
So Morocco happy, Cameroon
happy.
I think Tunisia because
frustrating.
they lost their easiest game on paper.
That's
why it's making
That's
frustrating.
what's frustrating. And Senegal also made history. So
I think Senegal will be upset just because it's almost like they didn't show up in the round of 16. I think if they had lost a close 1-0,
that would have been
they
much
probably
better.
would have been able to
But I
live
think
with themselves.
reaching on the grand scale of things, reaching the round of 16.
Minus
first time
Sadio
since-
Mane.
first time since 2000.
But the way they defended was disappointing.
And we take a quick break here. This is World Cup Daily on Citi TV. My name is Daniel Cranting. I'm in studio with Yahweh J. Minta and Susu Graham. When we come back, we'll zone and we'll talk about the Black Stars and their performance at the World Cup. Don't go away.